When the USS Fitzgerald was torn open in the dead of night, flooding compartments in seconds and killing 7 sailors, the first people sent into the smoke, fire, and rising water weren't pilots or gunners. They were damage controlmen. No warning, no pause, just steel ripped open, and time is already running out. This is peacetime service at sea, where mistakes kill just as surely as enemy fire. This is life aboard a U.S. destroyer when everything goes wrong, where a single failed repair can turn a warship into a total hull loss. The deadliest job isn't on the bridge, the gun mount, or the radar screen. It belongs to the sailors trained to enter the casualty space first. The damage controlmen. They are the ship's firefighters, medics, engineers, and last line of defense, and sometimes the survival of the ship itself depends on them doing their job before time runs out. If you're proud of the men and women who protect American warships from the inside out, hit like and subscribe so you never miss our defense breakdowns. Coal bombing in 2000. On October 12, 2000, at 11:18 a.m., the guided missile destroyer USS Cole was tied up on the port of Aden, Yemen, for a routine refueling stop. Suddenly, a small fiberglass boat packed with explosives pulled alongside and detonated against her port side. The blast ripped a massive 40 by 60-foot hole in the ship's hull, threw sailors across decks, and slammed through mechanical spaces just below the galley where many were lining up for lunch. 17 sailors were killed instantly, and 37 more were injured in the deadliest attack on a U.S. Navy vessel since 1987. When the dust and smoke settled, it wasn't weapons officers or engineers racing first into the chaos. It was the ship's damage controlmen, trained to respond no matter how bad things look. Among them was damage controlman 3rd Class William Merchant. In that moment of crisis, the shockwaves knocked Merchant and 2 shipmates across the deckhouse, scattering paint cans and breaking light bulbs as smoke began to choke the filter shop where they had been working. The lights went out, the ventilation quit, and the ship shuddered with structural damage. Merchant's team didn't wait. They descended into a darkened destroyer with their self-contained breathing apparatuses and helmets with lights before they ventured toward voices calling for help. There were wounded sailors trapped in the sagging structure of the chief's messes. Bulkheads had collapsed, and access was blocked, but Merchant and his shipmates improvised a plan to cut through wreckage, creating openings so they could reach the injured and guide them out to safety. That first rescue was only the first step in a much larger struggle. Over the next 96 hours, USS Cole's crew fought to keep their ship afloat. Flooding threatened to overwhelm machinery spaces, and warped bulkheads put the entire hull at risk of giving way. Damage control teams pumped out water, shored up the damaged structures, plugged leaks with improvised patches, and battled pockets of fire fueled by leaking fuel oil and ruptured electrical systems. Merchant's actions, entering smoke-filled compartments, freeing trapped sailors, helping dewater critical machinery spaces, and reinforcing bulkheads under threat of collapse, earned him the Meritorious Service Medal for heroism. His leadership and courage helped save dozens of shipmates and ensured us Cole would not sink in Aden Harbor. The destroyer Cole survived the attack, returning to the United States and rejoining the fleet. This is one of the intense cases that shows the role of a damage controlman on a U.S. destroyer, which is probably the deadliest job on board. The job of a damage controlman on a U.S. Navy destroyer, no matter how advanced the weapon's radar or propulsion systems, the moment something goes badly wrong, like a fire breaking out, a bulkhead rupturing, flooding, or a hazardous chemical leak, it's the damage controlman who must step forward first. A damage controlman is the Navy's emergency responder, firefighter, and structural repair specialist all in one. It's one of the most important specialties on a destroyer because the survival of the vessel and its crew can depend on their skill and speed. The role revolves around shipboard emergency response. When alarms sound, a damage controlman is trained to respond immediately, assess the threat, and take decisive action to contain it. They lead the initial efforts to prevent a situation from spiraling into disaster. Fire suppression is important to what they do. They are trained extensively in firefighting, mastering the use of hoses, extinguishers, and fixed suppression systems, and they know how to attack and isolate fires in confined and chaotic environments where smoke and heat can be lethal. Damage controlmen are also responsible for fire prevention, inspecting and maintaining fire detection and suppression systems so that when trouble strikes, everything works as it should. They are often referred to as the ship's fire marshal, ensuring that equipment is ready and that other sailors know how to use it. But their work doesn't stop at firefighting. They maintain the very systems that keep a ship stable and watertight. They fix and service damage control equipment, oversee ventilation and drainage systems, patch hoses and structural components, and ensure that watertight doors, fittings, and closures operate properly in emergencies. When a pipe bursts or a hull panel cracks, they perform emergency repairs, using techniques like plugging, patching, and shoring to stop leaks and reinforce weakened areas before the situation worsens. This might sound simple, but just imagine doing this while surrounded by fire or racing against time during a flood. That's why it's the deadliest job on the ship. An important part of their job is training and instruction. Every sailor learns the basics of damage control, but damage controlmen are the specialists who train the crew in emergency procedures, firefighting methods, and how to respond to chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. It's not easy being a damage controlman. Being a damage controlman means rushing into danger whenever there's an emergency. Over the past decades, we've seen many who lead the rescue of sailors in destroyers during crashes, fires, and floods. How did the damage control team aboard us, Samuel B. Roberts, rescue everyone on board? USS Samuel B. Roberts. On April 4, 1988, in the Central Persian Gulf, the U.S. Navy guided missile frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts was escorting reflagged Kuwaiti tankers as part of Operation Earnest Will when it struck a hidden Iranian contact mine. The explosion tore a 15-foot hole in the destroyer's hull, flooded the engine room, and broke the ship's keel. This was damage that would sink most destroyers. The blast knocked the primary gas turbines off their mounts, left the ship with commanding structural damage, and triggered fires and massive flooding in critical spaces. Yet, no sailor died in the blast. Every life on board was defended by the damage controlmen. The DCs acted without hesitation. They went into action to fight both fire and flooding, isolating damaged compartments and setting watertight boundaries to keep water from overwhelming the entire hull. The crew rigged emergency power to essential systems within 22 minutes, restoring lighting, pumps, and fireman systems that were important to buying time and mounting an effective response under extreme duress. For 5 hours straight, the sailors battled a dangerous situation, pumping out water, fixing the damaged support structures, and extinguishing blazes fed by ruptured fuel lines. Their teamwork and training helped them stabilize the destroyer until they moved out of the minefield. In the end, Samuel B. Roberts didn't sink and was taken for temporary repairs before it was returned to the United States for restoration. But it's not always the case that these teams can save everyone on board, like in the case of the USS Fitzgerald collision. USS Fitzgerald collision. Damage controlmen found themselves at the forefront again on June 17, 2017. Just after 2:30 a.m., the U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer USS Fitzgerald was steaming off the coast of Japan when the 29,000-ton Philippine flagged container ship ACX Crystal crashed into its starboard side. The Crystal's bulbous bow punched a huge hole below the waterline, puncturing machinery spaces, radio rooms, and crew berthing compartments. Water poured in rapidly, flooding 3 major spaces and knocking out power forward. 7 sailors died in the initial flooding, and others were injured and trapped on the ship. In those first terrifying minutes, the damage controlmen sprang into action. Salvos of water flooding threatened to overwhelm the ship's buoyancy and stability. They raced through darkened, twisted passageways where lighting had failed, shoring up weakened bulkheads and closing watertight doors to isolate flooding and prevent it from spreading further. The crew battled progressive flooding across 19 separate compartments for more than 16 hours, non-stop. But they weren't only facing rising water, but also live electrical hazards, structural damage, and noxious fumes as they fought to keep Fitzgerald afloat. In the berthing compartments that flooded within seconds of impact, damage controlmen coordinated rescues of trapped shipmates, pulling sailors from murky water as bulkheads and ceilings groaned under pressure. Others work to pump out water, reinforce weakened internal structures, and prevent the ship from capsizing, using every tool and technique to put the flooding under control. By dawn, the immediate threat had been handled. Fitzgerald made her way back to port under her own power, escorted by Allied vessels and aircraft. Later that year, 36 members of her crew were awarded medals for heroism and outstanding achievement in their damage control efforts. These cases reveal the importance of these sailors in sudden emergencies on destroyers, as they are the ones who lead the repair and restoration of the ship. Sometimes the DCs succeed, and other times they can't save everyone. Before we go on, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for the latest news and information on the U.S. Navy and life aboard sea. Role in emergencies. On a U.S. Navy ship, when something goes seriously wrong, damage controlmen are the sailors who immediately jump into action to keep the ship from becoming a sinking casualty. The moment danger strikes, they don their protective gear and head toward the danger. Their first objective is always to assess the situation quickly and stop it from getting worse, whether that means closing the watertight doors to isolate flooding, establishing fire boundaries to prevent flames from spreading, or cutting off gas and electrical lines that could fuel a larger disaster. They operate and maintain firefighting systems and equipment, bringing hoses, foam, and fixed suppression systems to bear on blazes in enclosed spaces where smoke, heat, and toxic fumes can overcome an unprepared crew. At the same time, DCs work to maintain ship stability and watertight integrity. If a hull is breached or a bulkhead fails, they use emergency pipe patching, plugging, and shoring techniques to slow or stop inflows of water. These structural repairs must hold under pressure as the ship goes back to its dock. In firefighting and flooding situations, they coordinate teams, assign tasks, and often serve as the ship's fire marshal. In real emergencies, the DCs are the ones the entire crew relies on to rescue those in danger and lead them out. But there isn't always danger on the U.S. destroyer. Every day, during times of peace and quiet, they are always busy taking care of the ship. Damage controlmen have the deadliest job on U.S. destroyers, but that's mostly during times of emergencies. When the ship is calm and everyone is going about their normal lives, what do? Well, the day in the life of a damage controlman is just as simple as any other sailor on a destroyer. A day in the life of a damage controlman. Reveille typically hits around 0600, and the DCs wake up in the rack, shower quickly, make up their rack, and head to the mess deck for breakfast, joining hundreds of shipmates in the compact dining space. After eating and catching up on any messages, they gather shortly after for the daily meeting or muster, where leadership lays out the ship's priorities for the day. Once the day officially begins, their work shifts into inspect and maintain mode. They inspect the firefighting gear, check the emergency breathing apparatus, ensure watertight doors and emergency patches are ready, and walk through compartments looking for potential hazards. Their job is to maintain the damage control equipment and systems that the entire ship will depend on in an emergency. Mid-morning and mid-afternoon often include emergency drills. Unlike other jobs where drills are occasional, they lead fire and flooding exercises so everyone knows exactly what to do when alarms sound. They coordinate with bridge personnel, engineering, or other divisions to simulate realistic casualties. Around 1200 and 1730, sailors take their lunch and dinner breaks in the mess deck, although damage controlmen are sometimes rotated into watch duties, so they have to eat on the go. After formal work hours, they might hit the small onboard gym, work on qualifications, or rest before another assignment. Some nights, they stand the midnight watch and have mid-rats before a new work period starts. A DC's day is about routine maintenance, watch standing, constant training, and emergency readiness. The Navy expects them to be ready at a moment's notice. But here's the twist. Even if being a damage controlman is the deadliest job on a U.S. destroyer, the U.S. Navy has found new ways to improve their life and safety while they are on the job. From rigorous training and protective equipment to advanced tools and smart systems, how does the destroyer crew protect them? Risk reduction. Over the decades, the Navy has continuously evolved how it prepares, equips, and supports damage control so that when emergencies strike, it can respond effectively, with fewer accidents, clearer procedures, better tools, and improved training. A huge part of this has been enhanced training programs that go far beyond what sailors once learned. The damage control school curriculum was expanded and modernized to include interactive multimedia instruction that lets trainees encounter simulated fires, flooding, and equipment scenarios before they ever step on a ship. Another major improvement is ongoing qualification and maintenance training that builds deep expertise. Programs like the Navy Afloat Maintenance Training Strategy now qualify personnel in specialized damage control and watertight systems, strengthening their ability to maintain safety equipment and understand it inside and out. This reduces mistakes and increases readiness across the ship. Technology has also played an important role in reducing risks. Modern damage control systems, including integrated software that tracks flooding, fire boundaries, and equipment status in real time, have replaced older manual methods. Teamwork and commitment. Damage controlmen don't act alone when a destroyer has an accident, but they act as a coordinated team with every sailor involved, because a destroyer can only survive if the crew acts as one unit. On a U.S. destroyer, they are leaders and integrators of damage control teams that include personnel from across the ship, and their effectiveness depends on communication, shared responsibility, and trust. The heart of this teamwork is preparation and practice. DCs lead regular damage control drills that bring together sailors from engineering, deck, weapons, and other departments. This forces sailors to coordinate under stress, communicate clearly, and act as a single unit to fight fires, stop flooding, and stabilize structural damage. They also serve as mentors and instructors. Experienced DCs often form damage control training teams that coach and certify other sailors across the ship. This gives them the confidence to execute them in chaotic conditions. Communication is equally essential. During emergencies, they coordinate with central control stations and repair parties so that efforts are synchronized across compartments, ensuring that pumps, watertight closures, and firefighting teams act in harmony rather than in isolation. When alarms are silent and seas are calm, damage controlmen fade into the background. But when steel tears, water floods in, and lives hang in the balance, they become the difference between survival and loss. This is the hidden fight inside every U.S. destroyer. What part of the damage controlman's job surprised you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this deep dive mattered to you, hit subscribe. We've got more stories from inside the U.S. Navy coming up, and you should check out our previous video on how high-ranking officials live on destroyers.